Marketer of the Day, number 473. Work less and make more. Track your time, delegate, and tidy up your super fast business with James Schramko. Hey everyone, you're listening to the Marketer of the Day podcast. Our guest is James Schramko, and James is an internet marketer and business coach from Sydney, Australia, and he owns and runs two online business coaching communities. One is called SuperFastBusiness, which is his paid community of entrepreneurs, and then one is called SilverCircle, which is his paid high-performance mastermind. And James is going to tell us all about his business and how he's been a business coach for 8 years, and he's helped over 2,000 of his students create and maintain 6, 7, and 8-figure businesses. So James, super glad to be talking to you.
Always good to catch up with Robert when I get a chance.
Yep, I think it might have been maybe 5 or probably more like 6 years I last saw you at Traffic and Conversions. So, I mean, yeah, and I have to admit, like, I don't know a ton about you, so I'm excited to jump in. I know that you do a lot of coaching stuff, you do membership sites, and then what I remember you being really known for a few years ago, we'll see if that's still true, is you seem to be a content machine. You had these blogs with stuff coming out all the time, and then back when podcasting was first getting a little popular with internet marketers, when marketers would maybe put out an episode every month, you had something like 4 different shows, and you had so much content where different content would go over to different shows. So that's what I know about you. I mean, is that still true? I imagine you moved on to some even more amazing things, right?
Well, it's interesting. I think depending on who you talk to, they'll know me for something different. I was helping people with software. So I was in a very similar industry to you. I was helping people build websites and recommending software, and I was an affiliate. And then I started creating guides. And from the guides, I went more into the coaching side. But at the same time, I was working with corporate clients, and I was helping them with their online marketing. So I did do a lot around traffic and content. So the traffic product that I put out a few years back was really popular. It was called Traffic Grab. Maybe some people remember that if they've been around for a while. And since then, I've simplified a lot. As you said, I got into podcasting, and I've been maintaining multiple podcasts up until this year. And I've now pruned back to my main Super Fast Business podcast. And I'm still putting out content pretty much every week, sometimes 2 or 3 episodes, sometimes 1, sometimes none. But I think we're up in the 600s now for our episode numbers, or 500 or 600 or so. And we probably deleted a couple because every now and then you got to go back and prune. And in terms of the business model side of things, I've got a much simpler business because I built up quite a large SEO firm and a website development business, and then I sold those last year. And that was great for a few reasons. One is it allowed me to learn every cycle of starting and growing and then selling a business. It also put me in a better position to help my students who might want to do the same, but also put some cash in my pocket and gave me a reward for all the effort that I'd done to build an asset. And it allowed me that singular focus on helping other businesses now without any conflict of interest. I can really just get under the hood and help business own online business. And I guess that's why we've sort of got to the point now where I wanted to summarize where I'm up to date and put it into one book. So that's probably how we reconnected again. And it's always really fascinating going over to the United States market because I'm from Australia, and meeting people like you and other people who are doing great things in the industry and developing that market and bridging the countries, because we're truly in a global market now, and the lessons that apply to one business can work really well for another business. So it's good to cross-populate ideas.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you get stuck in the same bubble, the same circle of people, and you have to talk to the same people and don't take risks, have the same way of thinking, that's no fun at all. So it's great to hear all those things that you're talking about, and most importantly that you got your focus back, you got the simplicity back, and that's really great to hear, because as you probably know, sometimes you see some marketer and they only have one website or one web page. And I look at that and I think there's no way that that's the only website that they've ever had. They've gone through this process where, maybe they put out a bunch of different things, tried a bunch of ideas, and then got to the point where it became too much to handle and they had to sell things off or clean things up. And then what you end up seeing is the end result of that, but you don't always see the trial and error process that got them from point A to point B. And then you can say, well, I didn't really learn very much from that. So it's great to hear some of that stuff. And so I saw your book before we started talking too, the Work Less, Make More. So if it's okay with you, that's kind of where I want to try to jump in. So, I mean, what kind of things do you have to say for us as far as
two main camps
this whole Work Less, Make
by
More
the beach,
concept?
Pina colada type, who want push-button automated riches, and they might be unrealistic about what sort of results they could possibly get in a very short time frame. And maybe those hopers and dreamers, get seduced by very tricky marketing and then get disappointed and frustrated. And then there's the other set, which is the, hustle, grind, work very, very hard mindset, which I would classify as straight up workaholic. And, I guess I came online originally thinking hammocks, and then I went into hustle, grind, workaholic mode, and now I would say I'm somewhere in the middle where you can actually have a really great income and not have to lose too much sleep or burn relationships or get overwhelmed or even shorten your life. And I'm not being overly dramatic here, but I do think some people are putting themselves at risk. I'm not being overly dramatic here, but I do think some people are putting themselves at risk with the number of hours that they work. So I basically came up with a few ideas that help people to just sort of think about what it is that they actually want and to give them some tools on how they might start to get it. So the classic example of what we were just talking about, simplifying my business, you're looking at the end result of a decade or more than a decade of trying different things and refining models. But really what I did is used a tool set that I like to use as a filter to help identify which parts of my business are more fun and more profitable than other parts. And perhaps if I were to drop, let go of, or sell some of the business units that are not as profitable or that I enjoy a little less, then maybe my life will be somehow a little bit better. Maybe I can work a little less and actually make more. And that's the thing. All business units are not equal, and all ideas that you might have for your business are not equal. And probably even within your one business, if you're down to that one business, probably different products that you sell or services that you provide are not all equal in terms of what they're bringing to your business. And using one of the exercises that I talk about, you can actually stop doing quite a lot of stuff and it would actually have no negative impact in your income, which means that you literally are working less and making more. Like for every hour that you work, you're making more per hour. So I'd introduced that formula called effective hourly rate, where you can measure that.
Well, great. And this is a subject that is really relevant to me, and I'm really curious about it because, well, first of all, every now and I sold a couple of my businesses, but I still have too many, and every time I look into it, I get super discouraged because sometimes I look at things and I say, oh, well, I didn't set this up so that I can just detach it. And other times I say, well, maybe I'll hang on to it so in case I have time later on to put attention to it. Or I think to myself, well, maybe I'll put some attention into it and get some traffic and get it selling, and that way I'll get a higher price. And then even with all that, sometimes I think, well, what if I put in the time to get this other business, on the marketplace, get it selling, and it just kind of sits there, doesn't sell? Then I have that worry that maybe that was time wasted, or that maybe even if that part of the business that I don't really like, if I just let it sit there, then maybe it'll wither away and die. And so I'm sure that a lot of people have
I think there's somewhat akin to
fears. So is that
having far too many clothes in your wardrobe. Maybe something we can all relate to, or keeping too much food in your cupboard, and then you go to use something and it's expired. So I really wanted to embrace this idea, because I know when you start letting go of stuff, like if you donate a bag of clothes to charity and then you're just left with the good t-shirts and the nice shoes, then you feel special every time you wear them. So I sort of really got into that 80-20 idea, and then I just took it further, because I was reading about how it's fractal. And fractal just means that it keeps working all the way through. And according to that 80-20 rule, like 20% of your invested input is responsible for 80% of the results that you're obtaining, right? In the same way that you're wearing 20% of your wardrobe 80% of the time, more than likely. So if you take it one step further, and this is where it's pretty crazy, if you apply the rule to itself, then 4%, of what you do generates 64% of your results. So what that really means is that you could pretty comfortably let go of some of these one-day ideas, and all it's going to do is make you feel a little more relaxed and take a weight off your shoulders and let you focus on the stuff that is already working and that is going really well. And I actually recommended in my book someone else's book on this subject, which was Con Marie's book, the Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, or something like that. And that book's really good about letting go. But over time, I'd built up a portfolio of 2,000 domains. I had 65 people, and we're in different markets with some of our business models. But I can tell you anecdotally that pulling back to less things has actually been quite liberating and more profitable.
Interesting. And it seems, and you know what, the way that you explain that, now that you've done it, makes sense. But then I imagine that also people who are still in the thick of it have a hard time accepting this. And so did I hear you right in that? So you say it's not just enough to apply that 80-20 rule. 80% of your stuff only gives you 20% of the results. The 20% that you want gives you the 80% of the result, but you square it. But the square, or the it was result of that, it's not 496, it's 464. So maybe there's still money left on the table, but that's okay, because the amount you're getting from that 4%, it's not the whole thing.
Yeah, you are.
But it's way better ratio.
What it really
Am I
means
hearing you
is
that
that
right?
more
From
than
you, and that's
almost
464.
2/3 of the results you're getting are coming from such a tiny part of your portfolio. It's usually one part of one product, or one little magic traffic source is delivering you most of your results. So in my case, it's most definitely podcasting. I'm getting a lot of my results from podcasting. It is the 4%. If I did nothing except for record a podcast for my show each week, that will sustain a 7-figure business. That means the rest of the week's off. I don't have to do that much else, as long as I put aside an hour in the entire week to record something. And that's where it's pretty profound. So yes, 4% gets you 64% of the results. But in other words, you could drop, if you just want to go back to the 80-20, you could drop 80% of the things you're doing and still end up with 80% of the results you're getting right now. I mean, that is still pretty profound.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And you're basically looking at what's in front of you, and you're optimizing it. And when you were explaining it in those couple of analogies, like, you take the old clothes that you never wore and you donate it to the homeless shelter or something like that, then, I mean, it's really funny, because you always hear about these exercises, right? Like, you go to the closet, and if you wear a shirt and wash it and put it back, to put the hanger back the other way, that way you can track what you wear. And then most people only wear like 5 or 7 items of clothing. And I was it also makes me think of, I was dating a girl one time, and her family, they were really bad pack rats. They had all the clutter in the garage, and there was so much that they'd never actually seen the middle of their garage in 10 or 20 years. So it's like at that point, if you haven't actually dug through all the junk in that garage, and you haven't even gotten to whatever's in the middle of all that junk in a couple of decades, then how important really is it? If you haven't used it up to this point, then do you really need it? And so I think that, so yeah, this is making sense, but I imagine that
Yeah, and I think
maybe
that's the
some
perfect
people
metaphor.
have some
Like, people are
emotional
literally stuffing
resistance
their
or
computer
hesitation
full of
to
gigabytes of
applying
information
things.
they're never going to read again, ever. I remember reading some statistic about filing cabinets that some huge, like vast portion of whatever they file away will never actually be looked at again. And I'd have to say that's probably true, because in clearing out my garage recently, we have to hold on to business files for 7 years here. Probably it's similar over there. And, I have not looked at those files for 7 years, and I just tip it into a shredder. And so the day I filed it was the last day I ever looked at shredder. So the day I filed it was the last day I ever looked at the receipt or whatever I put into that folder. So we take this exercise and reflect back on where we're at with our business right now. If we're a small business and we're still not at the scale that we think we should be, or it's not earning as much as we want, then I would seriously challenge you to, step one is at least make a list of all your assets and be quite deliberate about which ones do you really think you're going to do something with, and which ones could you just divest yourself of, or maybe cash in now, even if you haven't developed it all the way to the end. Sometimes you can actually get more for a renovation job than for the finished product, which is fascinating, but certainly true of some houses. If you give someone a half-completed project, if you were to sell that, they might see the opportunity in it and put the time and effort into it. But really the realization that just has to stick into it. But really the realization that just has to stick is that you have a finite amount of time. You only get a certain number of hours each month. So beyond that, it's just not going to happen. So if you could be realistic about that, then another chapter that I talk about is building the team, and that's where you start buying other people's time. So maybe you can bring in a team to do up these websites or projects that you want to get going. But one thing is for certain, if you haven't touched it for a while and you keep focusing on other things, then if you don't change something, that will just continue to be the pattern.
Yeah, I agree. And as you're explaining this, it's striking me that maybe people aren't being maybe scientific or methodical enough in some of this. Maybe they're letting their ego or their emotions get in the way, and it's preventing them from, number one, even making this list of assets. And then number two, they're not tracking their time. So then maybe their perception of time is skewed. And I'm imagining that possibly people, they just have a bad sense of how their time is. So they think they have more time than they actually do, and they think that they're getting more accomplished than they actually are. Has this been your observations in all this stuff, or agree or disagree?
Oh, I absolutely agree, and that's why I have people track their time activities. Like, you can install software that will do this for at least for your computer time, and start having a look at how much time do you spend on different projects, and are you getting a return on that? Because that's one great filter that can be used to score projects. The great thing is you don't even have to do the project for you to at least estimate what it might be worth to you. So you could open a spreadsheet and you could list all your fantastic, great, wonderful ideas, that you've got parked there somewhere in your development. The sale value of this project be, if anything? What would the ongoing cash flow be from this project? Is it in a growth market or a declining market? Is it easy to get in front of customers? Do you enjoy this project? And now you can start scoring this. Does it have recurring or one-time income? And once you get to the end, you can sort of come up with a score. And then you might just take the top few projects that have a high score, and you might look at it now quite rationally and say, you know what? Some of these projects are probably dogs. I don't love it. It's not necessarily a great market. It's difficult or expensive to get in front of the customers. And I'm really not even the best in the world at it. So I might just delete it or sell it or park it and never even think about it again unless I'm scraping for ideas.
Great. And yeah, and I imagine that, so that way, now that it's a little bit more fleshed out, now that it's rational, then that decision to either finish it, delete it, sell it as is, whatever the case may be. I imagine that now that decision is less painful, or maybe people can make that decision with more confidence because they're making the decision based off of those few minutes of putting the spreadsheet together as opposed to the gut
Yeah, well,
decision,
phase
which
one
could
might
be
be just a
50-50.
very quick spreadsheet using some of those filters, checking that there is actually demand in the market and, that it's a good product for people. And then the second phase might be to put together a very low resolution offer to just get the smallest version of it out there that you could have a customer put down a deposit on or purchase, or at least validate the offer before you go building it too much. And if you use these two filters, this might really help you sort of sort out which opportunities are better than others. Because as entrepreneurial types, which I'm sure you're attracting to a show like this, we do come up with a lot of ideas and we can see the good in everything. But just having these sort of questions to ask can really help you eliminate things, and that's the name of the game. It's I would say it's like putting up bumper rails when you go 10-pin bowling, and the bumper rail is like, if an idea sucks and it doesn't look good on the spreadsheet, and there's it fails a few of your criteria, you really should let that ball just roll into the gutter, because it's a waste. If you use those filters as a bumper, bowling a ball that will likely knock down some pins. It's not always guaranteed, but it's a pretty good chance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're stacking the deck in your favor, so to speak. And so when it came time for you to get rid of this SEO firm, how did you come to that decision? Was it a similar process to this of taking that inventory, running the numbers, figuring out the score?
Yeah, there's actually a few interesting factors there. The buyer of my SEO business was actually my biggest customer, who was one of my coaching students, who came all the way from seeing me speak at an event in Dubai in 2009, like sitting in the audience, just starting from scratch. He'd just been, just left a photographic studio and had nothing to do. So I taught him how to sell to local businesses, online marketing services. And he was so good at it, kept buying more and more and more of our SEO supply, to the point where he was what I would classify as a big fish, which is when any one of your clients starts to be using the bulk of your capacity. And that actually gets pretty dangerous for you, because at some point, only a few things can happen. They'll realize that they could probably start their own gig and cut you out of the loop. That's called vertical integration. So there was a risk that my big fish customer might start out on his own. The other thing is that it makes sense for him to buy the business. And that's really where we got to, because he was buying so much of the supply. I said to him, you either cut me out or buy the business. I think, as your coach, I'm telling you that impartially. And even though I had offers on the business a few years prior, the people who were wanting to buy the business then didn't want my team. They just wanted my customers to port into their existing infrastructure. And I didn't want to put my team into the unemployment pile. I didn't feel that was responsible as an employer. So even though the offer was financially good, it wasn't morally good for me. So with this customer, it was a perfect scenario, because he's my student, he's growing, he wants the team and the customers, so everyone gets what they want. The team are happy, the customer's happy, I'm happy, and the end users are happy. And since he took over the business, he's continued to grow it, and it's going fantastically well, which is my perfect scenario. And I'm really happy because I got acknowledged for the work that I did, and I'm able to put my focus into serving my current customers. So that was sort of the foundation as to it. And from a general perspective, I'd say the market that he is in, which is in that United Arab Emirates market, is still a growth market where it's got explosive movement in the online world, and they're still sort of racing ahead, whereas probably in the United States market, and to some extent, the UK and the Australian markets have settled down a little bit. He's just in this purple patch of hypergrowth, and he deserves all the success that he gets because he's really worked it from the ground up.
Well, what an amazing story. That's pretty cool. And so, as you're explaining that, what came into my head is that, and feel free to disagree with me, but do you think that getting into that situation, getting to that point where there's a problem, getting to the point where things need to be cut loose for one reason or another, that's not something to be avoided, right? Like, is that a good thing? Is that part of the cycle of like getting to the point where the business becomes unmanageable, then you cut?
Well, there's
then
something
it builds
called the
up
Peter
again? Is
Principle,
that
which is
just part of things, or
where
is that a
people
thing
reach
to
their
be
level of
avoided
competency
completely?
or go just past it. So that's why you see sometimes a startup founder does okay in the beginning, and then eventually someone comes in and replaces them or ousts them, like happened to Steve Jobs. Where he's pushed from his own company, where the directors or whatever, the investors feel that they can do a better job. It's quite possible that some of your audience will build a business that goes beyond their capacity to run it. So that's just a realistic situation. I'd like to think that life is wonderful and rich and full of change. And that's the one thing that I've really been quite comfortable with the whole time. That's the one thing that I've really been quite comfortable with the whole time, is accepting change. And I remember when I quit my job to go full-time into my own business, I made a promise to myself. And that promise was that I will always be able to innovate and I will be able to navigate around change, because that is the constant that I'm facing when I'm in business for myself. And it's actually even true if you're an employee. You just don't realize how dangerous it is until you get terminated. So, I think that it's to be embraced. These challenges that come up, and every single person who I coach has little side balls come at them, and curve balls, I think you call them, and challenges. And I just say, look, celebrate this. This is the difference between you and someone else. These challenges are opportunities. Challenges are opportunities for you to move past where your competitor gets stuck in the mud. If it was so easy, you would have a lot more competition. So we celebrate these difficulties. We call them investments in experience, and they are going to happen. Doesn't matter whether it's you or me. The most perfect person you could think of has probably got secret challenges or pains that maybe you're not aware of. It could be anything from maybe it's not being able to have kids, or maybe they've got a painful relationship with a parent, or maybe they have a rogue partner who's a gambler that's fleeced them or forged their signature on documents, or they have a fantastic, amazing employee who passes early, or whatever. These things are just the nature of life. And we're born, and then we live, and then we die. So in between, it's a pretty wild ride. The massive risks that some people undertake, they do crazy things unless they know what to look for, and that's the thing. We often have this blind spot. So it's good to get extra cameras on, and to have a lot more awareness of what's going on, and to avoid some of the pretty common mistakes.
Well, that's some pretty deep stuff for getting into life and death and all those things there. But all that's very reassuring. So thanks for saying that. And what helps me quite a bit is that reminder about it being difficult for everybody. And especially if I'm in a situation where I'm developing some kind of software, and either I'm coding something myself, or we're trying to figure out how to get, different libraries or different team members, employees to figure out a problem, whatever it is. If we come across a brick wall, I tell myself, well, we're not the only ones coming across this problem. Everyone else is having the same difficulty, but there are the weak hands that are giving up at the first or second or third bump in the road. So now they're all gone, and then that thins the herd for us. So challenges equal opportunities. And so this is really great stuff, and I don't want to keep you around here for too long. I want to make sure that everyone knows all about you and your stuff and your Work Less, Make More book, and about your podcast, about your coaching programs, all that fun stuff. But as we're beginning to wind down here, is there anything that you wish from after all your journeys and all your things that happened to you, is there anything that you wish you could say to your younger self? Like if you could send a message back in time, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever.
Yeah,
is there any kind of
it's an
life
interesting
lesson
question
that you wish
because
you
I'd be
tell your younger
wary
self?
of messing with time. I'd hate to not end up where I'm at right now, and that might sound kind of weird. It's sort of along the lines of not having regrets. But I think what you're really asking is, what would I advise someone listening to this that they could learn much faster than it took me. I want to share something that's that I actually picked up from a friend of mine called Dean Jackson that I think is very important for small businesses, especially solopreneurs. And
he's the inventor of this
friend of mine,
the opt-in page,
wonderful
so we got to listen to him,
dude,
right?
very creative, super smart, and we're very fortunate to spend a week or so together each year when he visits my place. And the conversations we have are great, but I actually sat in one of his workshops that he runs, and he said this thing, and I've been saying something similar, but I think he says it better, so that's why I want to credit him. Workshops that he runs, and he said this thing, and I've been saying something similar, but I think he says it better, so that's why I want to credit him. He said, stop worrying about how and start focusing on who. And that really is, that's where I made the most traction in my online business, is when I stopped trying to figure out how to do stuff. And no offense, Robert, because I know this is your industry, but I shouldn't have learnt how to build a website. I should have just found out who can build my website. And these days, I'm relieved of having to know how to do a lot of things. For example, on a day-to-day basis, I don't log into my website or my email system or my shopping cart or my support desk. My team does that stuff. So my concept is one layer back. So I like to get a layer back from all these tools, and then I like to get help with them. So instead of worrying about how to specialized thing, you could spend a lot of time learning about it and still not even be that good compared to a fully blown Facebook ninja. So sometimes it's just better to say, look, who do you know who's great at Facebook ads? Or who do you know could build me a website? Who do you know could help me with my CRM or writing emails? And start building a team. And the very next question that comes after that, Robert, is, but I can't afford that. So how do I do that when I'm still not making enough money? And that's why I'd say, look, if there's only one thing that you focus on right now, and this is my advice to myself in the old days, just focus as quickly as possible on finding that offer that converts, that the sales offer you can put up that someone will hand over their money for. That's all that matters, not some indication from people that they might be interested in something, but what is that offer where you give people the opportunity to buy something from you and they buy it? Because once you have that, you've got a business, and then you can scale that. Then you can build a team. Then you can refine your offers. You can find the more profitable offers. You can change your billing payments. You can make it a great business around that offer. And I took the first offer that converts when I started online to a 6-figure a year business from one offer. And once I got the hang of it, and even now in my business, I've really only got 2 main offers. And you don't need a lot of offers. You just need a really good one that makes sense for customers, that's good for people, and it's good for you. And then scale it to the level that makes you happy. And that might not mean $10 million a year, which is a very common objective for people who I talk to. And I usually question that. I say, is that really the goal? Is $10 million a year making life happier for you? Is that really the goal? is $10 million a year making life happier for you than, say, $6 million a year? And often the answer is actually no.
Interesting. Well, I love it, and that's great advice. And what I'm hearing from you is that these things that we can build, these businesses, these teams, they're things that we can grow and shrink and sell, but then time itself, we can't get that time back. So it makes more sense to play around with the business and to build it up and have it to do what you want, as opposed to being a slave to time, which means that we're trying to do it all ourselves. We're avoiding buying the $100 course or the $10,000 coaching. We're avoiding that in order to spend 6 months figuring something out. But you can always get the money back. The business can come and go, but you can't get that time back. So kind of a hard lesson that, I'm always looking to delegate and remove myself from the business. Easier said than done. Sometimes I need a few reminders over and over again. I think a lot of our listeners do. So it's important to get that offer that converts. Well, I'm curious to hear about your offer. So if people are listening right now today and they say, geez, this guy, James Schramko from Australia, he knows his stuff. I'm super impressed. I want to go to his websites and buy his book and buy everything there is to get from him. Where should they go and what should they get from you?
Well, thank you, Robert, by the way. You can buy Work Less, Make More by James Schramko on Amazon. So that should be pretty convenient for most people. You'll get an excellent overview of my concepts and a lot of action plans. And if you want to go to the next stage, if you'd like me to coach you in your business, then that happens at SuperFastBusiness.com. If you have a business that's doing more than $200,000 a year profit, then you might want to look on, which is where I help people at a higher level, and it's even more customized and more access. But I will say that even at the Superfast Business level, you would expect to have a significant return on investment if I'm helping you in your business. You don't have to do it alone anymore.
Now you're the guy that they've been waiting for. So the three tiers, just to recap there. So the bottom tier for people to get started and find out about you, that's on Amazon. That's Work Less, Make More. To check out everything else, go to superfastbusiness.com. And then if you're at the 200K profit per year level, then join SilverCircle.com. So lots of good stuff that we talked about today. And as we're wrapping things up here, James, we have a mutual friend and his name is Dennis Becker. And I always heard the story about how he had some income goals to hit and I think he hit them. And then the dream of his was to fly over to Australia to meet with you or hang out. Did anything happen from that?
Well, I haven't seen Dennis yet. I've never met him face to face, but he's a lovely gentleman. And I really enjoyed hanging around in his community in the early days, and I've seen some of the people who are in there go on and do some pretty amazing stuff. Some of the top people in the industry now used to hang out as buddies in that forum. But I do hope to meet Dennis if he's still around. That'd be fantastic. And I come over to the United States quite often, and I remember usually reporting to him where I'll be. So it's still out there, Dennis, if you're listening.
Well, if you're ever on the East Coast, James, and you like gambling, I guess he has a condo over in Atlantic City, New Jersey. It's like the Las Vegas of the East Coast. But I'll make sure Dennis gets this episode, and we're going to leave all this in here for the public, so that way Dennis and you can connect, because I think he's a great guy too, and just wanted to know about that update. So yeah, maybe we'll have to report back, and maybe I'll have to get Dennis on the show and figure out if you guys ever finally met. I've only met him, I think I've met him once, maybe twice, but maybe you guys will connect. And so everyone else, make sure you grab Work Less, Make More. Go to superfastbusiness.com and silvercircle.com, and we'll see you there. And thanks so much, James, for stopping by and sharing your stuff. Subscribe to us right now while it's still fresh on your mind at marketeroftheday.com/